Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Emily Anthony. Emily is a graduate in our full-time MBA class of 2023, and she and I recently connected to talk more about her MBA journey, her current work at Dick's Sporting Goods, the impact of her Darden experience, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to Experience Darden so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Emily Anthony. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, how's everything? How's your 2025 going so far?
It's good. It's very busy. Lots going on at Dick's Sporting Goods. I'm kind of in the midst of a busy rotation in real estate. And also I'm interviewing a ton of candidates for our internship program this summer. So it's been busy, but all exciting, fun stuff.
Is it fun to be on the other side of the table, so to speak? You remember when you were applying for jobs and now you're interviewing people for internships?
Yes, I have to say it's much better on this side of the table. Just the pressure is sort of off at this point. And it's really wild, honestly, to reflect on how short of a time period it's been from, going through the MBA process, looking for, my dream job, and then being on this side of things. It happens very quickly. So I always say whenever I'm speaking to current business school students, you'll be sort of through the funnel soon enough and kind of out on the other end in a career that you enjoy. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, but again, glad to be in my seat today.
Yeah, you're so busy in an MBA program. It's not like you have a lot of downtime just to sort of think and reflect. I think a lot of the reflection probably comes after the MBA program,
Exactly.
honestly. Well, let's talk a little bit more about you. So tell us who you are and what did you do before coming to Darden?
Yes. So I'm originally from Florida. I went to UVA for undergrad, majored in media studies, and minored in studio art. So I think growing up and all through college, I envisioned myself working in content production. I didn't really know exactly what that looked like. I liked the idea of, creating media and influencing people through, content online. I don't know. I had sort of a grand vision that was about, working in New York and maybe working for an advertising company, working for a magazine, maybe trying journalism. And that's sort of where I focused the first 5 years of my career. So I ended up moving to New York after undergrad, and I worked at a startup for a year and a half, actually a job I got through a UVA alum. And it was a very fast-paced environment. I was producing content for Facebook primarily, and the goal of social media content is for it to go viral, right? So we were sort of looking at trends and churning out content every day with the hope that it would go viral on Facebook, and oftentimes it did, which was great. And I think I did that for about a year and a half before Facebook changed their algorithm to deprioritize content like the stuff that I was putting out via the startup I was working for. And when that content was deprioritized, it meant that we basically lost our audience overnight. So the startup failed pretty quickly after that. No one was seeing our content anymore. There were no revenue streams because of that. And when the startup failed, I did some freelance work in video and content production, which was great. A really, big step up for me, I think, career-wise. And from there, I was able to get a job at Clinique working in the content production department in-house for them, also in New York. And that's where I spent 3 years prior to business school, leading up to business school. And at that point, I was able to expand my skill set beyond social media production. And I started working on really big global ad campaigns. Um, so I feel like I really saw my um, vision for my career come true, at least what I thought my vision was, or what it was when I was younger. I played that out. And I kind of just realized over time that I wasn't actually able to be as creative as I wanted to be in that role. Oftentimes, when you're creating content, the strategy was figured out well before the work came across your desk. Like, um, I would get a brief from the marketing team on a new product launch or a campaign that you're going to be producing. And obviously, research and development had already made the product. The marketing team had already segmented our consumer base and chosen who we were going to go after. And I was getting the deliverables list and the campaign kind of outline, and I was executing on that. And I just craved being further upstream in the decision-making process. So that's sort of where my career was at. And then also COVID hit. So that just presented me with a little bit more time and space to reflect on what was next for me.
I assume that is when you got interested in pursuing an MBA.
Yeah, yes. So when I was an undergrad, I actually interned at Darden, which is kind of funny. I was in their marketing department, and I don't know if I did anything particularly meaningful in that internship, honestly, but it was really great exposure for me because I was able to come to the school and honestly just walking around Darden, similar to all of UVA, really. It just has kind of an effect on you that makes you want to pursue big things. And that sort of experience in undergrad stuck with me for all of the years that I spent in New York. And yeah, I remember being in Florida in December of 2020, speaking to my dad about how I felt a bit stuck in my career and how I was thinking about business school. And I was in one of those Forte fellowship or Forte Foundation. It's a year-long cohort program where they help get you ready for business school. And I remember thinking, like, okay, so I'm in this Forte program and it's setting me up to apply next year. So I would have to wait a year to apply to business school if I kept with the pace of that program. And I was talking to my dad, and he was like, well, can you apply now? Like, just apply now. And I was like, well, Dad, if I apply now, I will be applying round 3. And from what I understand, that's the hardest round to get in during, because they've already filled most of the class up already. And I think that's sort of where the conversation ended. And a couple weeks passed. I went back to New York after the holidays, and I was just like, something hit me one day, and I was just like, I'm just going to take a risk and just do it. And they wouldn't have round 3 if they didn't want to take anyone in at that point. So I chose to apply to just one school, which was Darden. And if I didn't get in, I could always reapply next year, and I could, at that point, apply to more schools if needed. And luckily, I didn't have to do any of that because I did get in. So I'm really glad. I'm not a risk taker. I wouldn't say at all, but I did take a risk on round 3, and I'm super happy that it worked out.
That's not an uncommon round 3 story. People say, you know what, I'm here. I'd like to get started if I can. If it doesn't work out, I'll apply next year. And you know what? I'll have the experience of having gone through the application process at least once. Kind of give me some feedback, what it's like. Maybe I'll have interviewed, sense of what that's like to interview for an MBA program. That's not an uncommon story to hear from round 3 applicants.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember thinking it was kind of refreshing too when I got to Darden. Were pretty honest about their application experience. And that seems to happen, I don't know how often exactly, but people, don't get in and they apply next year. It's like it's not the same as applying to undergrad when you kind of have to go after high school.
Yeah, you have more flexibility. And, I think we talk about this all the time with applicants. Many students at Darden applied more than one time. We value reapplicants. That's part of the journey for some of our students. And it can be really helpful sometimes to have gone through the application process once and you kind of get that feedback and you think, you know what, if I do this again, I might approach it just a little bit differently. That conversation comes up often here on the podcast with people in particular who the first time they went through the application process, they felt like they had to be some kind of idealized sort of MBA candidate. They wanted to sort of project something that maybe wasn't as authentically who they are. And then they go through that, kind of get that feedback and realize, you know what, I'm going to do it differently. I'm just going to be who I am. And you know what, if I get in, I'll know that they've chosen me for who I am. And that sort of authentic version of who they are comes through. And guess what? It's different results. And I think that that's important for people to hear and to know that that's part of the MBA journey for some students.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that authenticity point is sort of the biggest message I would like to deliver today. Um, I think throughout my career and throughout my time at Darden and even today at Dick's Sporting Goods, I always lead with authenticity because it's just served me so well in the past. It's proven itself to me time and time again that if you just do what feels right to you, things will work out in your favor and luck will come your way and you'll be at the right place at the right time. And it sounds cheesy, but it really has worked for me. So, and yeah, it starts with the application when it comes to business school. So,
Yeah, we are absolutely interested in who you are as a person, not just what you've done academically and professionally, and who you are personally matters a lot in the learning experience at Darden. Obviously, you're joining a community here, one where you're going to be engaged in the classroom, outside the classroom. And so give us a chance to get to know you through the application process. So I love that advice, Emily. So you come to Darden. What was the adjustment like for you? Obviously, it's something that you said, I know I want to do this. I want to get started. So you get started. Were there any learning curves?
yes, there were learning curves. I think, I mean, I was really excited socially to be there. It was, um, I guess it was fall of 2021. So I think everyone at school at that time was so happy to be interacting with new people and in person with people. So um, at the same time, COVID was still very much uh, top of mind for people, and it was sort of we were trying to find our balance at that time. Academically, it was like drinking water from a fire hose. I had no background whatsoever in anything we were learning in core. I thought maybe the marketing class would have some glimmers of familiarity, and it really didn't. It didn't. So I don't know. Yeah, I got through it. So, and I learned a lot, and over time I realized that, well, first of all, you can rely on your peers a lot to teach you. And that's either your learning team or the people in your section. And that is a huge gift. And there's also even tutoring that's led by the second years. So there are a lot of different um, resources out there to help that I use to help me keep up with things. Um, but even with that, you're doing a new case for each of your classes. You're preparing for one, every night. And I think, I'm somebody who does a lot to stay grounded. Like I do yoga, I meditate, and it was hard for me to adjust. I'll be honest, but I think that challenge is really rewarding when you come out on the other side. And um, something too that I learned over the course of the year, something that somebody also I think said to me at one point, a second year said this to me, is you don't have to be an expert in everything you learn in core. You just have to have some familiarity with it so that when you're at work one day and it comes across your desk, you know what you're looking at. Whether it's, you know, P&L or some, marketing metrics, or just really, you don't need to be an expert. It goes a long way to just have some exposure and to know that in the past you've spoken confidently about, you know, an IRR for some potential investment or something like that. And I feel that way now. Like I'm in meetings all the time now where I might not know exactly how something was calculated, but I know what it is, you know what it means, and I can use that information to inform an opinion. So having that in the back of your mind, I think, in your first and second year even is helpful.
Yeah, I always try to tell students it's about fluency, right? It's about you understand these things, you have familiarity to use your word, but you're not going to become an expert in every single thing in the core, and that's not the idea necessarily with the general management. Sort of, you take the sort of broad sort of core, and then you move into electives. You take a deeper dive into some areas, but you're not going to be an expert in all of these areas. So you come to Darden. Obviously, there's some adjustment process for you.
Mhm.
How did your career goals evolve during your time at Darden?
So in my application, I wrote about entrepreneurship, actually. So I think I mentioned already, I do yoga all the time. And I was doing a lot of virtual yoga during the pandemic. And I thought it would be nice if there was some sort of platform where yoga teachers could centralize all of their videos and online or live classes so that people like me could go to one singular place and look for new instructors and new content and things like that. And so that's what I wrote about in my application. And at the very beginning of my time at Darden, I started looking for kind of entrepreneurship opportunities, professors who could help me test this idea. And I came to realize pretty quickly that I didn't want to take the first few steps to get that idea off the ground. It kind of, the first few steps being that like I would need to be somebody making content and posting it online, and I would essentially have to turn myself into an influencer, which was just not something I wanted to do. I wanted to get away from content production. That's why I went to school and why I was leaving my previous career behind. So um, at that point, I think I pivoted my interest a little bit to venture capital and to entrepreneurship through acquisition. And somewhere in that process, I realized that what I really wanted my next career opportunity or job, it was to help people live healthier, active lives. And after kind of coming to that epiphany, I realized ETA probably wasn't going to make sense because you can't control what companies are available to purchase. And venture capital, sort of similarly, you're evaluating a lot of different businesses, and oftentimes, health and wellness are not the focus of VC firms' thesis. And I just sort of really broadened my scope to anything that fit into the mission of helping people live healthier, active lives. And at one point during strategy, which was one of the classes in core, we learned about Peloton. So there was a case on Peloton. I don't even remember the specifics of the case, honestly, but there were many characters in the case, and they were all internal strategy uh, executives. And at that point, that was the first I'd ever heard of there being internal consulting at any company. Um, and I think my fear was that I love this internal consulting concept. I can't believe it's at a company like Peloton, but the word consulting sounded like um, not something I wanted to do because I'd only ever really heard about it in the context of consulting firms, which obviously that's a huge funnel for Darden. I was not sure if internal consulting at a health and wellness type company existed. So I was sort of figuring things out as I went with one piece of truth. Um, that being, I want to work somewhere where I can help people live healthier, active lives. And somewhere along the way, I saw this Dick's Sporting Goods job on our career page. And I think I looked at it one or two times before applying, and I was a little unsure if I wanted to move to Pittsburgh. And after Christmas break, everyone was in the throes of their interviews, and I hadn't really had a meaningful interview at that point. So I applied to this program at Dick's, and the more I learned about it and the more I learned about the company, the more excited I became. And I think that interest and authenticity again really showed through in my interviews. And obviously I interned at Dick's and came back full time. So these things, they do kind of have a way of working themselves out if you kind of stay true to what you know about yourself.
You go to Dick's after graduation. How has your Darden experience been helpful to you in the roles that you've had there?
Well, something that I was told, this was when I was at Darden, I was the president of Resilience Initiative, which we basically just put on all kinds of events to help people get away from the rigor of classes and recruiting and to just give people something to do that allows them to reset their mind and body. So oftentimes it's meditation or yoga, but we kind of thought outside of the box too and did like cold plunges and saunas and hikes and mindful eating exercises. Like we did so many different things and to build resilience in ourselves. And something that this was purely coincidental, the VP of strategy said to me when she was giving me my full-time offer was, you are just incredibly resilient. Like, that was the word she used. And I thought, wow, that's amazing that you saw that in me because it's something that I've been practicing at Darden and something that I tried to cultivate in other students as well. I didn't say that to her. That was all in my own head. But that sort of way of operating is something that has continued with me through today. And I think, my like I said, the work culture here is very balanced and people are able to sort of spend time with their family and friends and pursue their personal interests while working. But those sorts of habits and ways of being, they kind of start they start in business school. They even start before that, but you can really cultivate them in business school. And I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, I think you're right that resilience and these kind of sort of personal wellness habits. I mean, life is not going to slow down for you after business school. Business school is busy in its own way, but most people also have a fair amount on their plate as they begin their careers and add in family commitments, personal commitments, all this kind of stuff. And so having those habits, thinking about those things is important. Why not start when you're in an MBA program?
yeah, yeah, yep, exactly.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the roles that you've had at Dix, what you've been up to since graduation.
Yes. So I think I mentioned I'm in a rotational program, And the program is housed within the strategy department at Dix. So when I was telling that whole story about Peloton and seeing internal consulting for the first time, I achieved that dream. That is kind of what I'm doing now, in the sense that I get assigned different projects around the company, or sometimes I uh, go out and find them myself through networking with different executives across the company. Um, and they're usually very cross-functional in nature and long-term growth oriented in nature. So things that we maybe aren't doing today, but that we want to test and do on a bigger scale tomorrow so that we can continue growing as a company. And so I guess I should say too, like the first 6 weeks of my full-time experience at Dix, I worked in the store, which was I was in a retail store in Tampa, Florida for 6 weeks. And that was very humbling. I'd never worked in retail before, and coming right out of business school and doing that, it's what a shock to the system. But it was really important training for me. So I did that, and then when I got back to Pittsburgh, my first rotation was real estate, helping kind of build out our strategy around House of Sport, which is our newest, latest, and greatest banner. It's expanding quite rapidly. And after doing that for a few months, I went into merchandising. For about 6 months, worked on our emerging brand strategy and our regional relevance strategy. So making sure that stores across the country are stocked with product that people in those geographies need and want. And after that, I went to store operations and worked on a project to kind of restructure the way that our teammates in stores report up into one another and how they assist athletes. That that was a monster of a project, and I actually passed it. I passed phase 2 along to a recent Darden hire. She's just the year below me, Katie Jorgensen. So I sort of have tag teamed with her on that work a bit. And then now I'm back with the real estate team, and I've really found I'm in I guess this isn't official yet, but I am pretty 95% sure I'll be placed with them in the next couple months. And I think the real estate team, like I said before, that we're really growing our footprint right now, in store count and just square footage nationwide. So our stores are getting bigger, and we're opening more stores basically. And the real estate team, they're just the best people. They're the people that I just want to be around every day. And it's such an interesting dynamic because I come from this creative marketing space, worked in beauty and social media, and most of the people in real estate are lawyers or came from finance. They're mostly men, fathers. They're just very different from me. They didn't have never lived in New York. They're so one of the things I learned in business school too is how valuable it is to have a diverse team, because people have different perspectives and people listen better to those who are different from them. And that I found that to be very true in my current experience with the real estate team here at Dix. I feel very valued because I have a different perspective, and I also have so much to learn from everyone around me because they have such a different background than I do. So that's what I've also been doing a lot of Darden recruiting. I went to Darden twice already, and I think I have 15 interviews, not just Darden folks, but people from various top business schools. And we're interviewing them for this coming internship class. So I think I think that's everything that I that I have to say about what I'm up to currently. But I really do feel like I have the dream job. Like this, I could not have um, ended up in a better situation.
For those interviews, it must be nice to be with a company that people see on TV that they've perhaps shopped at themselves, that they just have that kind of awareness about what exporting goods is, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, I when I worked at Clinique prior to business school, I thought that that was so cool that people knew what brand I was working for, and Dick's Sporting Goods is exactly the same. And um, it's a company that most people think fondly of and have experience with. So it's fun to hear from friends, that live in other places that they just went to the Dick's Sporting Goods in their neighborhood and had whatever experience. And um, every time we just opened a House of Sport in Tampa at the mall that I used to go to growing up. And, my dad and my family go there all the time and they send me photos of themselves there. And, I know the people who work in the store there now because I did that 6 weeks of training in the store there. And actually, when I was down there for Christmas this past holiday, I worked in the store for just a few hours to see how things were going. So yeah, there's a cultural element of working in retail that's pretty unique, and not a lot of post business school opportunities have that in such a direct way.
So a female-led company.
Yes. So the CEO is a woman. Her name's Lauren Hobart, and she she actually started at Pepsi, or her career took a few different turns, but she worked in Pepsi in marketing, came over to Dick's, worked as the VP of marketing, I believe. And I don't know, I guess Ed Stack is the son of Dick Stack and the executive chairman today. And Ed met with, Ed obviously hired Lauren, and they cultivated this strong partnership over the years. And Ed is the executive chairman still, and Lauren is now the CEO, kind of steering the ship. And I have to say, they and also the rest of the executive team at Dick's, they are the most accessible, rounded, normal, humble, open-minded people that you could ever imagine leading a company like Dick's Sporting Goods. It's I don't know if it's Pittsburgh and there's just less egos here or what. I really can't figure it out, but it just that sort of willingness to communicate and collaborate and make ethical decisions trickles down to people at my level and just throughout the company. And it's something I really value, because not that the places I worked at prior to business school had anything wrong with them. It just made it, I didn't feel like I could contribute as openly and freely in my previous work experiences as I do here at Dex. Like, people want my opinion. People want to know what I think. People value my opinion. Um, my insights and data have been spoken about on earnings calls. The things that I am doing are important and used versus just sort of getting through every day, um, trying to meet some arbitrary deadline or something. Like that's not how I feel here. And that's why I say, like, I feel like I won the business school lottery. Yeah.
Why do you think they have you start in a retail store?
Well, a lot of the strategic projects that we work on have huge implications for our stores. And that's where we make money. Most of I mean, of course, we have a website, and that revenue stream is growing as well, but our stores are where we interact with our athletes most directly. Um, our stores are where our vendors go to understand how their brands are showing up at Dick's Sporting Goods. It's really where all of the action happens. And not to mention our teammates, the vast majority of them work in stores. And a lot of them have been working for Dick's longer than most of the people in the corporate office. Like we have some 10+ year teammates in our stores. And it's really important to understand the work that they do on a day-to-day basis. And not only to empathize with it, but to just really understand what they are doing to fill our shelves, to the work that goes into unloading trucks, any sort of inefficiencies that might be happening in the process, any risks to the business that might be occurring in stores, like shoplifting. We call it shrink. What does that look like? How do people on the ground deal with that on a regular basis? There's so many things that happen in our stores that if you're on the strategy team, you need to be aware of, and you have to be able to have a conversation. I mean, I'm regularly meeting with people who work in our stores and work in the field. And if you can't have a conversation with those people and get on their level about what they're talking about, it's going to be hard to provide a worthwhile strategic vision at the corporate level.
Well, what do you miss about not being in Charlottesville, about Darden? What do you miss about that?
Well, I will say Pittsburgh's only 5 hours away from Charlottesville, so that's been awesome. And it's such a beautiful drive to Charlottesville from here. It's all through farmland and stuff. So it's a treat to drive down there. Charlottesville is a very special place to me. I mentioned before I went to undergrad there. So I feel like I really grew up there and learned a lot about it myself in that town. I think I really miss the access to nature and the beautiful hikes that are so 20-minute drive max. There's actually the Ravenna Trail. I didn't even know about it in undergrad, which is so absurd. But at Darden, a lot of the housing that Darden students end up and the Ravenna Trail runs right behind it. Actually, I think Darden as well. Yeah, of course. The Ravenna Trail is all right behind the housing at the school. So you can just walk out and you're suddenly on this gorgeous trail that goes all around Charlottesville. And you can do a piece of it. I never did the whole thing because it's incredibly long, but I used to do that almost every day. I would just run on the trail for 45 minutes or so. And you'd see like turtles and deer, and sometimes they would get slippery if it had snowed or rained. But it was just such a nice break from school and anything that involved a computer. And I definitely miss being around so many peers who are motivated and smart and inspiring. I mean, I have a lot of people that I work with at Dick's who fill that void, but it's nice to be kind of all in the same boat looking for a job together. I think the friends that I made at Darden have stood the test of time. And for me at this point, I'm still in touch with a lot of them. And I just miss having some of them closer by. What else could I say? I don't know. Something about the rotunda and the corner just warms my heart. I love walking around those buildings, and it's hard to kind of put into words, but when you're in a place to learn and develop yourself that reflects that, I don't know, the vision that you have for yourself is reflected in the architecture. It really helps. It helped me focus and stay motivated. Darden and the undergrad grounds area is so beautiful and historic and inspiring and so well maintained and so unique and all of that. I just always felt so lucky to be walking around those spaces and to be doing so while I was trying to further my development. And it was just a motivating place to be. And I don't think every school is like that. So.
Have any final words of advice for our prospective student listeners? Something that they should keep in mind, in your opinion, as they think about their own MBA journeys?
Yeah, I think I would say this is advice that you'll hear again if you go to business school, but keep your blinders on, meaning that it's just stay aware of what you're after and what you're looking for. What's something that you know to be true about yourself and what you hope to find in your career. And you might not need, you probably won't have all the answers, but just what is that one thing that you do know about yourself, and just follow it all the way through. And if you do that, you'll be in really good shape when you are on the other side.
Yeah, so much about this process is about knowing yourself and really understanding who you are, whether you're applying to business school, going through business school, thinking about what comes after business school, thinking about when you get there, what's next for you, and sort of thinking about how you want to build your career. Self-understanding, self-awareness is huge.
Yeah. And I think one other aspect of that too is being willing to let go of things that you tried that didn't work out. I had a fair bit of that in my first 6 months of business school, where I was testing entrepreneurship and venture capital. And after a while, I was just sort of like, this is not serving me. It's not working for me. It's not ultimately what I want or need. And I let go of it, and having sort of the ability to make that call is also just as important as knowing what is true to you.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for your time today. I know it's a busy work day for you there in Pittsburgh, but it's been great catching up with you. And I'm excited to hear that you're doing some interviews with Darden students. Maybe you'll have a few more people joining you.
Yes. Hopefully, I'm sure we will. We've been hiring more Darden students every year, it seems, and I'm happy to be in their company.
And that was my conversation with Emily Anthony, a graduate in our full-time MBA class of 2023. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.